I was 3 days away from the most important presentation of my career when my boss's son-in-law had me escorted out of the building by security. Not for performance issues, not for misconduct, because he wanted to bring in his college roommate instead. 22 years of building this company's financial foundation, and it ended with a cardboard box and a form to sign before noon. Here's what they didn't understand when they made that call. Those relationships I'd spent 2 decades cultivating weren't tied to the company letterhead. They were tied to me. And they were about to learn the hard way what happens when you put a 29-year-old with zero commercial real estate experience in charge of a portfolio worth $340 million. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 54 years old, and for most of my adult life I've been the chief financial officer of Hargrove Development Group in Atlanta. We weren't the biggest commercial real estate firm in the Southeast, but we were respected. Pension funds trusted us. Regional banks called us first. Institutional investors flew down from New York specifically to meet with our team because we had something rare in this industry, a track record of doing exactly what we said we were going to do. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I was at my desk by 6:45, going through the due diligence materials for the Meridian Center acquisition. 47 floors of Class A office space in Midtown, a $310 million transaction that had taken 14 months to structure. The sellers were represented by a firm out of Boston that had given us exactly 6 days to finalize the financing package before they walked to a competing buyer. I had the institutional lender on board, the mezzanine financing nearly locked, and a bridge gap that I'd personally worked with 3 regional banks to cover. My assistant came in at 8:15 and told me that the chairman wanted to see me upstairs. I didn't think anything of it. I grabbed my coffee and the summary sheet I'd been preparing for him on the Meridian timeline. What I walked into was not a briefing. The chairman, Gerald Hargrove, was 71 years old and had built this company from a single strip mall in Marietta into a multi-state portfolio over 4 decades. He was sitting behind his desk, and standing next to him was his son-in-law, Connor Briggs. Connor was 29. He had a finance degree from Clemson, 2 years at a mid-size property management company in Charlotte, and the complete confidence of a man who had never once been told that he was wrong about anything important. He'd married Gerald's daughter 18 months ago, and in the 12 months since joining the firm, he'd managed to offend every department head, alienate our longest-tenured property manager, and propose 3 separate efficiency restructuring plans that would have cut the people who actually made us run. Gerald didn't stand up when I came in. That was the first tell. "Marcus, have a seat." He gestured toward the chair across from his desk, the one that was slightly too far away, so you had to lean forward to feel like you were part of the conversation. Connor was scrolling through something on his tablet, not looking up. "I've been thinking a lot about leadership continuity," Gerald said, in the tone of someone reciting a speech they'd rehearsed. "As we move into the next chapter of Hargrove Development, I want to make sure we have the right structure in place." I set down my coffee. "Is this about the Meridian closing? Because the financing package is..." "It's not about Meridian specifically," he said. "It's about organizational fit, long-term vision, making sure we have people in key roles who are aligned with where we're going as a company." Connor finally looked up from his tablet. "The CFO role needs to evolve," he said, with the practiced ease of someone who had been waiting for this moment for months. "We're looking at someone who can integrate better with the digital transformation initiative and bring a more collaborative approach to investor relations." I'd heard him use the phrase digital transformation initiative 14 times in the past 2 months. I'd started counting. I looked at Gerald. After 22 years, Gerald had the decency to look uncomfortable. "You've done tremendous work, Marcus. No one is questioning that, but Connor has identified some structural gaps that we need to address, and we think a transition..." I stood up. I didn't intend to. My body made the decision before my brain caught up. "Who is taking over the Meridian financing package?" I asked. "We close in 72 hours. The bridge commitment expires Friday at 5. If someone doesn't confirm the final draw schedule with First National by Thursday morning, we lose the deal. We'll handle the transition carefully," Connor said. "Connor." I said his name the way you say a word you're not quite sure is spelled correctly. "Connor, the bridge lender requires a CFO-signed authorization for each draw. They will not accept a VP signature. I negotiated that term myself. It was a risk management condition they insisted on after the Chattanooga fund defaulted last year. If you don't have a licensed CFO execute that authorization, the commitment dies and we lose our deposit." He blinked. "We can get that waived." "You cannot get that waived in 72 hours. These are institutional lenders. They don't do verbal waivers over a long weekend. Gerald cleared his throat. Marcus, we'll make sure the technical details are handled. There was a packet on the edge of the desk. I recognized the format. HR had used the same template 3 times in the years I'd been there, though never for someone at my level. Non-disparagement agreement, non-solicitation clause, severance terms, 8 months of salary. For 22 years, I want you to know, Gerald said quietly, that I have the highest regard for everything you've built here. This is a difficult decision. He said it like he'd already made it a long time ago and was only now catching up to himself. I picked up the packet. I'd like to have my attorney review this before I sign anything. Of course, Connor said, but we'd like this resolved today. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I looked at Gerald, who was studying a spot on his desk somewhere between us. Then I took the packet, shook Gerald's hand because 22 years deserved at least that, and walked back down to my office. I had 40 minutes before the HR director came to begin the separation process. I used them well. My personal laptop had been under my desk since the moment Connor started making noises about auditing executive devices 6 weeks ago. I'd moved everything I needed to my personal cloud the same week. Not client files, those belonged to the company, but my personal financial models, my deal frameworks, my proprietary underwriting templates that I'd built over 2 decades and refined through hundreds of transactions, the ones the company had never bothered to formally document because they assumed I'd always be there. I also had my personal phone, and in that phone were the direct lines of every meaningful investor relationship I'd built since 2004. Raymond Chu, managing director at a Boston pension fund that had deployed $85 million through us over 6 years. Patricia and I had been in contact enough that I knew the name of her golden retriever and her son's college major. David Okonkwo, who ran a family office out of Nashville and had done 4 deals with us since 2017. He'd called me, not the company's main line, my personal cell, when he was deciding whether to expand into multifamily. We talked for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon. The Fairfield Capital team in Charlotte, who had specifically requested me by name on their last 2 engagements, and about 20 others. These weren't company assets. They were relationships built over years of early morning calls, weekend crises, and the kind of consistent follow-through that made people trust you with their capital. I packed my reference materials, my framed photo of my daughter Keely at her college graduation, and the small wooden plaque my team had given me when we closed the Peachtree Commons deal in 2019. It said, "The numbers work because the people do." Security walked me to the elevator at 11:40 inches the morning. I drove home and sat in my kitchen for about an hour. The silence of a Tuesday midday in a house that's usually empty is a particular kind of quiet. My wife, Denise, was at work. My daughter was in Charlotte. I could hear the refrigerator running. The anger came and went in waves. Then something cleaner settled in underneath it. I opened my laptop and started making a list. The non-solicitation clause covered existing clients for 12 months. I'd read it carefully in the parking lot before driving home, and more carefully again at the kitchen table. It prohibited me from directly soliciting Hargrove Development clients for competing business. It said nothing about accepting calls. It said nothing about providing general market guidance to parties I had pre-existing personal relationships with. My attorney confirmed as much 2 hours later. The non-disparagement agreement was standard. I had no interest in disparaging anyone. I planned to let the situation speak for itself. I sent 2 emails that afternoon. One to my attorney, one to an old colleague named James Whitfield, who'd left commercial real estate 4 years ago to start a boutique advisory firm. We'd stayed in touch the way people in this industry do quarterly lunches, the occasional call when one of us needed a sounding board. He'd invited me to lunch twice in the last year to talk about a potential partnership. I'd politely declined both times because I thought I had a career at Hargrove. I wrote, "James, I have some time on my hands. Would love to catch up." He responded in 11 minutes. His response was 2 sentences. "I've been waiting for this message for 2 years. Call me." I spent the rest of the week taking stock of what I had. I set a 30-day window before doing anything that could be interpreted as competitive activity. That mattered not just legally, but professionally. Reputation is the only currency that can't be reprinted, and I'd spent 22 years accumulating it. During that 30 days, I started hearing things. My former assistant, who had stayed on, texted me on day 4. She wasn't sharing confidential information, she was just checking in, the way someone does when they like you and feel terrible about what happened. She mentioned that the Meridian deal had hit complications. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I already knew where the weak point was. On day 9, Raymond Chu called my personal cell. Marcus. His voice had the careful neutrality of someone choosing words deliberately. I want you to know that your departure came as a surprise to a lot of people. We've received some communications from your firm that I'd describe as confusing. I'm not in a position to discuss specifics, but I wanted to reach out personally. Raymond, I said, I appreciate that. I can't speak to anything involving the firm. But I'm happy to talk generally about the market if that's ever useful. That would be appreciated. I gave him the name of an attorney I trusted. Not for business, just because he needed someone competent if things were getting complicated. On day 12, the Meridian deal collapsed. I didn't learn this from anyone inside Hargrove. I learned it because the Boston seller's attorney was connected to someone at James's firm, and the word traveled through the market the way these things do. The bridge authorization hadn't been executed correctly. The draw schedule had a technical deficiency that the lender flagged on the morning of closing. By the time anyone understood what had gone wrong, the window had closed. The sellers took the backup offer. Hargrove lost a $4.2 million deposit. I sat with that for a day, not with satisfaction, with something closer to grief. 14 months of work, a deal I had spent nights and weekends structuring from the ground up, gone because someone had been too proud to admit they didn't understand the mechanics. On day 15, David Okonkwo called. Marcus, I'm going to be direct with you. We've had 2 calls with Connor over the past week that have left my team with serious concerns. I'm not asking you to violate any agreements. I just want to understand, from a market perspective, what we should be thinking about as we evaluate our institutional relationships going into the next cycle. David, I said, I'm 30 days from being able to have any substantive business conversations. But as a friend who has been in this market for a long time, I would always recommend that any investor evaluate their relationships based on who specifically is managing the work, not just the firm's brand. He thanked me. He said he understood. He said to call him when the 30 days were up. James and I met for lunch on day 21. His firm, Whitfield Advisory Group, was smaller than anything I'd worked with. 8 people. Boutique, focused on complex transactions that larger firms found too demanding. That was exactly the kind of work I was built for. He didn't lead with a job offer. He led with a question. What would it take to make you whole? I told him honestly. I wanted a senior partner role. I wanted economics that reflected the relationships I was bringing. I wanted the kind of firm where the work actually got done by people who knew what they were doing. And I wanted no part of any arrangement where I'd be window dressing while someone else managed my client relationships. He nodded the whole time I was talking. That's exactly what I want to build, he said. I've been waiting for the right person to build it with. We didn't shake hands on anything that day. But we both knew the conversation had happened. Day 30 arrived on a Thursday. That afternoon, I called Raymond Chu back. Raymond, I'm now in a position to have a substantive conversation. I've joined Whitfield Advisory Group as senior partner. If you have any concerns about your current representation that you'd like to discuss, I'm available to help. Marcus, he said, I've been expecting this call. Our investment committee has been discussing our relationship with Hargrove since the communication breakdown last month. I want to set up a formal introduction with your new firm. This week, if possible. Before I hung up, I asked him carefully, not as a solicitation, just as due diligence, whether there were other investors in his network who had expressed concerns. He mentioned 3 names. All 3 were people I knew well. All 3 had my cell number in their phones. Over the following 2 weeks, the calls came in steadily. Not because I was engineering anything, because the market was giving me information, and I had the experience to be useful. David Okonkwo called to say his family office was formally transitioning its advisory relationship to Whitfield. He said his team had lost confidence in the communications coming out of Hargrove and needed someone they could trust on complex transactions. I thanked him and told him James would set up an onboarding call. The Fairfield Capital team called 3 days later. Their general counsel had apparently received a contract amendment from Hargrove that had errors in the risk allocation section, errors that a first-year associate should have caught. They were polite about it. They said they had nothing against the company, but they needed reliability. I didn't celebrate any of these calls. I took them, documented them properly, and passed them to James's team to handle through legitimate intake processes. Everything above board, everything documented. Connor sent a legal letter through Hargrove's outside counsel on day 41. It alleged that I was engaged in a coordinated campaign to tortiously interfere with the company's business relationships. It demanded that I cease all communications with former clients and threaten litigation. James read it over the phone, his voice completely flat. This letter has about as much legal weight as a strongly worded birthday card. He sent back a response through our own counsel that outlined, with meticulous precision, every contact I had received, the voluntary nature of each client departure, the pre-existing personal relationships predating any non-solicitation window, and the documented performance failures that had precipitated the client concerns in the first place. It also noted, calmly and without editorializing, that if Hargrove wanted to pursue litigation, we would welcome the discovery process. We didn't hear from their outside counsel again. The call I hadn't expected came on a Wednesday, week 8, not from Connor, from Gerald. His voice was different from the last time I'd heard it. Smaller, more careful. The way someone sounds when they've spent several weeks absorbing something they didn't want to be true. Marcus, I hope you're well. Gerald, this is a surprise. I imagine it is. He paused. You've seen the news about Meridian? I had. It had been picked up by the Atlanta Business Chronicle, a brief item about the failed acquisition, the lost deposit, and the lender disputes that had followed. Nothing incriminating, just a factual account of a deal that had gone wrong at the closing table. I've seen it. Another pause. We're going through a difficult period. The board has questions about leadership structure. I've been in some challenging conversations about the direction of the firm. I waited. I made a mistake, he said finally. Not the way people say it when they want credit for saying it. The way people say it when they've been sitting with it long enough that it's become just a fact. I should have listened when you told me about the bridge commitment. I should have listened a long time before that, about other things. I didn't say anything right away. I thought about 22 years, about the Peachtree Commons close, about the nights I'd worked through the Christmas holidays to get the financing packages ready for January board meetings, about the plaque on my desk that I'd taken with me when security walked me out. I'm glad you called, I said, genuinely, but I think we both know it's too late for the conversation you're probably hoping to have. He didn't argue. That told me everything about how bad things had gotten. I appreciate you saying that honestly, he said. I want you to know that the board is making changes. Connor won't be in the CFO role going forward. I had no response to that would have helped anyone, so I simply said I hoped the firm found its footing, and I wished him well. 12 weeks after I'd been walked out by security, I was sitting in my corner office at Whitfield Advisory Group, a proper corner office now, with windows that looked out over Buckhead when my assistant knocked. Channel 11 and the Business Chronicle are both asking for comment, she said. Hargrove Development just filed for Chapter 11. I turned on the conference room TV. The reporter was standing outside the Hargrove offices downtown, describing the emergency reorganization filing, the collapse of 3 major investor relationships following the Meridian deal failure, and what sources were describing as a breakdown in financial controls over the previous quarter. They cut to Connor briefly, outside the federal courthouse. He looked nothing like the man who had stood in Gerald's office scrolling his tablet while my career was being ended. The confidence was gone. The designer watch was gone. He was flanked by crisis management attorneys, reading a statement he clearly hadn't written about the firm's commitment to restructuring and protecting investor interests. A reporter called out a question. Mr. Briggs, sources indicate that Hargrove lost over 60% of its institutional investor base in the past 2 months. Can you address the departures? Connor looked up. This is the result of coordinated pressure from a former employee. Which former employee? He hesitated. That single pause was the moment. Any attorney watching knew what came next was going to be a problem. Marcus Webb, who was separated from this company in February, has been the subject of a non-solicitation agreement that we believe he has violated. Mr. Briggs, another reporter jumped in. Can you clarify the circumstances of Mr. Webb's departure? Sources suggest he was replaced to accommodate a personal relationship within the company's leadership structure. Connor's jaw tightened. We made a strategic leadership decision. He said it, live, on camera. Exactly those words. James appeared in my doorway a few minutes later, shaking his head with an expression caught between professional satisfaction and genuine disbelief. He just confirmed on television that your firing was a discretionary strategic decision with no performance basis, James said. That's going to be useful for about 11 different reasons over the next 6 months. I turned the TV off. I didn't need to watch the rest. That evening, I got a text from Keeley. My daughter had been following the story from Charlotte, where she worked in commercial lending. She didn't say much, just, Dad, you handled this like you handle everything, with class. I'm proud of you. I sat with that for a long time. 6 months after the day security walked me out, I was a named partner at Whitfield Webb Advisory Group. We had brought on 31 institutional and private investor relationships, almost all of them transitions from Hargrove, made voluntarily, driven by client preference, documented meticulously throughout. James had handled the legal architecture of every onboarding with the precision of someone who'd been waiting for this exact moment. My former assistant had joined us as my executive coordinator. She'd reached out 2 months after I left Hargrove, and I'd hired her immediately because I knew what she was worth. David Okonkwo's family office had referred 2 additional investors, both of whom came with substantial portfolios and a specific request to work directly with me on their next acquisition cycle. Raymond Chu's pension fund had increased its advisory engagement beyond anything they'd done with Hargrove in the final 3 years I was there. The Meridian Center had been acquired 6 months later by a competing firm at a slightly lower price, financed cleanly, with no bridge complications. I followed the deal from a professional distance, the way you watch a storm that almost caught you. Gerald Hargrove had resigned from the restructured board in month 4. I heard through the industry network that he'd moved to coastal Georgia. I didn't reach out. Some things don't need a final conversation. Connor had left the firm shortly before the bankruptcy filing, which struck most observers as an act of self-preservation, several months too late. I had no strong feelings about it. The situation had already taken care of itself. I was in my office on a Thursday afternoon, reviewing the term sheet for a new transaction, a mid-market industrial portfolio acquisition in the Nashville metro, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Raymond Chu. Marcus, the investment committee voted unanimously to nominate Whitfield Webb for our preferred advisor designation in the Southeast. Effective Q3. Well deserved. I set the phone down and looked out the window at the Buckhead skyline. Somewhere behind me, I could hear the hum of the office, James on a call in the next room, my assistant coordinating a due diligence timeline, the quiet, productive energy of a small team that was very good at what they did. Here's what that Tuesday morning in Gerald's office had actually taught me. The thing underneath the obvious lesson about nepotism and incompetence and institutional arrogance. The thing I hadn't fully understood until I was sitting at my kitchen table in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon with nothing but silence and a list. The work that makes you irreplaceable is never the work that's on your job description. It's the work you do in the margins. The relationship you maintain through the difficult transaction. The call you return at 7 p.m. on a Friday. The institutional knowledge you carry in your head that no one thought to document because everyone assumed you'd always be there to recall it. That's not something you can replace with a college roommate or a digital transformation initiative. You either built it or you didn't. I had built it for 22 years. And when someone tried to take it from me, they discovered that the part of it that mattered most had never belonged to them in the first place. I closed the Nashville term sheet, made 2 notes in the margin.
Some days feel off, like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to. There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, a little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I'm freezing, I'm bleeding, slowly fading away. But don't worry, I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile, every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here, maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, no, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. No, I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay.